Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Now, Israel and Hamas had agreed to a Qatar-mediated deal for a 4-day truce in Gaza and release of 50 captives held in the enclave. Now, about 150 Palestinian women and children have been held in Israeli jails to be freed as part of the deal. The question we ask ourselves is, does this really mean anything, given that it would only last for 72 hours, and what happens after those 4 days? Joining me now is Abadallah Grifat, who is a Palestinian activist. He also works with Palestinian organizations in developing the understanding on activism and apartheid and colonialism. Abdullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for joining us.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Abdullah, there is the ceasefire, and as much as we look at it maybe from the half glass full in terms of there can be humanitarian aid that is coming through to Gaza, does this really make any difference? Because what happens after the 72 hours?
Well, it does make a difference because the people of Gaza, they don't look at what's going to happen after the 72 hours. They look at the current situation. Because at the moment, for them, the aid trucks that will come, the fuel, will make some difference. We do aspire for an immediate and long ceasefire, of course, to save lives. But unfortunately, the Israelis are speaking about months of war. So this for again, the people of Gaza themselves, they look at it as at the moment, because they, for the past 46 days, they haven't been able to even grieve, which is the least that they deserve at this point. They live a situation that none of us can even begin to imagine. So again, yes, it's just one of it's the struggle at the end of the day, and it's part of it. It's better than not having a ceasefire at this point.
Abdullah, one of the concerns is that Israel has always tended to not adhere to international law. And one of that is, will they even adhere to the 4-day truce? Is there a concern that many Palestinians share? Or are we about to see something different? In your view, where do you see this happening?
Well, at this point, in a way, they have to, because the way the deal is constructed is that Hamas will not release all the Israeli hostages one time, but rather they will release them on stages. And this was done in particular to answer to this point, because obviously no one can trust Israel because they don't respect any deals or any processes. So for the resistance, what they have done is that they put in place a system where they only release 10 to 12 or 13 hostages a day. So Israel has also a lot to lose in case or if they break the agreement.
Abdullah, the discussions, of course, with regards to the ceasefire, this is, of course, the short-term one. What is the hope for a long-term ceasefire? We see a lot of external factors that are happening. For example, South Africa are part of a BRICS convoy that is trying to work on a permanent ceasefire. Qatar themselves are trying to work on a permanent ceasefire. This was, of course, the short-term solution. How important is that 4-day ceasefire, the long-term ceasefire going to be? And, of course, what happens then after that? Because there is so much that needs to be rebuilt in Gaza, given what has happened for the last 46 days.
Well, I don't want to sound negative, but to be honest, it seems very difficult to imagine a long-term ceasefire at this point, because I was just reading a report now about how Netanyahu himself and the military, despite all the disagreements that they had before the war, but at this point, they both agree that they need to continue the war. For Netanyahu himself, as prime minister, he sees that, and his cabinet, obviously, and the people around him, they think that the moment the war starts, the whole government will fall down, and political career basically will end. Netanyahu himself, he might end up in jail, or he might run away and never go back to Israel. For the military themselves, they have a reputation that needs to be rebuilt, basically, after what happened on the 7th of October. If we look at the ground at this point, Israel has not succeeded up until now to achieve any military victory, basically. The Israeli reports themselves speak about that Israel hasn't been able to destroy not even 10% of Hamas's power. So imagine how much difficult it will be to take over the entirety of Gaza and to end Hamas rule completely, which is at this point looks impossible, actually. So for that reason, it seems like Israel wants to have, there is an agreement between the political and the military, the army, and the political leaders and the leaders of the military to have a longer war. But the only factor that will make a change, actually, there's two factors. One is the international pressure, which doesn't seem to be much. It is building up, and Israel might lose the plight like in the coming few days. But as long as the United States is on their side, and as long as the United States is not wavering, Israel doesn't care about the rest of the world, unfortunately. The other factor is the Palestinians who live inside of Israel. If they do rise up, then they might change the factors. If the maybe other, I would say, militant groups like Hezbollah make any move, but they made it clear Hezbollah, they are not going to move, they're not going to do anything. So basically, at this point, only Palestinians in the 48 who are also not doing anything, unfortunately, because their hands are very, very, very tight. They don't have much to do. It's really difficult for them to move. And the international community, again, Israel doesn't care about the international community. It's not that they are not doing their part, because South Africa, you can see that they have done more than many without pointing fingers, but Israel, it's just a matter that Israel is the one who doesn't care. They only care about the United States. And I don't mean to sound negative, but that's what the reality is, and that's what Israel has been telling us, showing us since the beginning of this war.
Abdullah, I know that you, of course, stayed here in South Africa, so you also understood politics with regards to how it operates in South Africa. You also kept a keen eye on yesterday's National Assembly ruling, which, of course, was a overwhelming majority for the suspension of diplomatic ties with Israel. I just want to get your view on it, because South Africa took quite a strong stance, didn't it, when it came to yesterday, and of course 2 weeks ago, when it withdrew its diplomats from Tel Aviv.
Yes, of course. And to be honest with you, I expect nothing less than that from South Africa. From a country that went through apartheid and defeated apartheid, I think it's only natural that South Africa does what it did. And it's not something that we also take light. We do recognize that South Africa is probably one of the most, if not the most active state that is supporting the Palestinians. And for that, we are thankful, and we have to acknowledge that South African effort. But again, as I said, it's only natural for South Africa to play this role and to be on the side of the oppressed. That, again, the Palestinian experience better than anyone else. So yeah, that's what we expected from our allies, as I would say, and from our fellow human beings. It's natural to act, in this way.
Abdullah, one final question. Somebody like yourself who has a deep understanding of the law and international law, President Cyril Ramaphosa, again yesterday, during that BRICS briefing, reiterated for Benjamin Netanyahu's government to be charged for war crimes. Now, we've been seeing a rallying call from many international lawyers for that request and referral to the International Criminal Court. Is there light in the end of the tunnel with regards to that? Could we, not maybe in the next weeks or months or years, potentially see Benjamin Netanyahu and those responsible coming to The Hague and standing trial for what has happened in Gaza, not just over the last 5 weeks, but stretching from the early 2010s?
Well, we do hope so. I think that it's very important that that South Africa leads this process, and that I know it's actually extremely difficult considering South Africa's economy, and considering, like, that you are still as a country, as a developing country, you need all the ties. We understand that it's very difficult, but again, for South Africa to do this is only natural, but also it's very important that we continue, that there are these institutions like the ICC and ICJ, they are there for a reason. And even though that up until now they haven't really persecuted, any Western leaders for the crimes, it's important that we keep reminding these organizations of their role. And in a way, we see that the international community, the international politics is shifting. BRICS does play a very important role and on pushing the international community into the right side. It has been for way too long dominated by the United States and the Western powers, who have been always biased and always hypocritical, I would say, and always on the side of the oppressors. They've always been on the wrong side of history. And so it's important to use these channels that are already there, even though that they haven't been, historically, they haven't been that effective, especially when it comes to Western, criminals. But at the same time, it's important to continue using all the channels, whether it's the legal channels, the diplomatic channels, the social channels, the people basically on the ground, whatever channels that you can put pressure on Israel, we should continue to use these channels, and we should continue using and putting pressure on Israel from all different sides. At the end of the day, even if ICC is something that is in the back of their heads, we should still keep trying, because the general, not only Netanyahu, but the Israeli generals, everybody, every Israeli official would now think, often about the ICC, and that mere thought, having a nightmare about it, is good enough for the time. It's better than nothing again, and we should continue, using all the channels that we have.
Abdullah, shukran so much for making the time for us here on Hilaal TV.
Thank you.
That's Abadallah Grifat, a Palestinian activist. After the break, I'll have your latest in news. Do stay tuned.